Now, what we wanted to do for the episode of this month is something a little different than what we've been doing in the past, which is typically going through a very structured model of going through the rules, the models of reality, and the systems for living. I wanted to put that aside because I wanted to talk about something that's very relevant within our culture scape right now. We have covered this topic in the past, but I don't think that discredits the amount of attention we need to put on this issue. It's about men and women in the workplace. Now, when we started Impact, we did have an interview with Dr. John Gray. And what we thought would be a very interesting thing to provide for the tribe is an empowered woman's perspective of what is it like to be in the workplace and how do you own your own space, how do you take on leadership, and what are the things that could prevent women from success, or what are things that are missed opportunities for women to be successful in the workplace. Now, the guest that I bring to you is someone that I cherish very much. She is a close friend. And what I want to do is give you a bit of a background of who this person is, and you'll be surprised to see who it is. She is a philanthropist, she is an artist, she is a mother of two. She is also a massive entrepreneur, has built her own division of a business in Russia, which is massively successful. She's taken the stage both in the Russian language and in the English language, and she just so happens to be the co-founder of Mindvalley. And so it's with my great pleasure that I bring Christina Mandlakiani on this month's episode of Impact at Work. Let's get started. Hi everybody, so I have Christina on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Jason.
So we're going to be touching on the topic of women at the workplace and the interaction that happens between men and women when we're at work. Now, I know this topic is something that we chose because you had just spoken on the stage for a women's forum. Would you want to share more about that?
Yes, because normally I don't talk about feminine or female, male gender inequality or equality or balance. I actually normally talk about business, about happiness, about personal growth, and I talk about that from the perspective of just one human being, not like a man or a woman. It just happened so that I was invited to speak at a big women's forum in Kazakhstan, and this topic is interesting. It was a very interesting experience for me, and when we planned this episode, it was very high on our agenda. And somehow conversation moved actually from business, purely business, into female-male interaction in the workplace. So I guess there's nothing in this world happens out of no reason. That I believe there's a reason why this is happening. So I'm just going with the flow and talking about whatever you want me to talk about.
Perfect. Well, we do have a good structure of questions that actually came from the women at Mindvalley. And so we went into Mindvalley and we asked a lot of the colleagues that are here a lot of the issues that are pressing for women in the workplace. And we really wanted to have you come here and give us some topics and your opinion on the topic. And by the end of the episode, we are going to have some systems that are going to challenge a lot of the aspects that are considered rules when it comes to women in the workplace. Now, before I get into the structured question, I did want to ask, do you feel that with a lot of the awareness campaigns that are happening now, do you think that the situation in the workplace for women is getting better recently, or is it getting worse?
I would probably start answering this question making a step back, because as I said, I normally talk about humans, not about man or woman, and I believe as humans we are all the same. Yes, we have biological differences, but that if you go into my systems for living, you will understand that our biological difference is actually not too much of a disadvantage for women. And on top of that, we have certain qualities which makes it easier for us in the workplace as well. So I believe that as humans, we train other humans around us how they're going to treat us. So, and let's make the framework clear from the start. We are talking about Western environment right now. I'm not talking about the world at large, because I'm also a philanthropist, and I know that there are a lot of countries where women have to still fight for their rights right now. And we're not going to talk about that, because this is not the reality for most people who are watching this show. Let's talk about Western environment, because that's where we function, and that is what is relevant for us. So in the West, I believe, awareness is important, but what is wrong with what is going on right now that I see is that we are at odds, we are in a fight. It's like, men versus women, cats versus dogs. In reality, we have to talk about balance and about us as humans, because I do not see myself any different from a man. And the first rule of personal growth is to take responsibility onto yourself. Nothing happens to you. we train the world to happen to us, the people to treat us a certain way. So the moment you take responsibility for everything that is happening to you, you will see that you cannot be a victim. You cannot be a victim in any circumstances, including you cannot be a victim as a woman in the male environment. Of course, again, another sidestep is that I admit some women become victims of physical violence. It happens. It has happened to me when I was a child. And these cases we're not going to talk about because this is something completely different. Let's talk about work environment, regular communication between men and women, and how do we make ourselves work in that environment.
Perfect. And so what you're going to notice is the way that I'll structure the rules here are going to be a statement of victimization, because I know that you have a way of reframing the model of reality that's going to be much more empowering. And so with that, let's get started with our first Brule statement. The statement is, there is a gap, a gender gap in the workplace, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm speaking as from a position of a woman.
So there are two sides of the statement. There's a statement that there's a gap, and if you look at statistics, definitely there is a gap. In different countries, the gap is varies. So I come from the Northern Europe, also from the post-Soviet background, where women were actually really plugged into the workforce and into the whole environment. So I'm coming from the background of a little bit less of gap by default, but there is a gap statistically speaking, of course. Women generally tend to earn less, have to work for free for longer periods of time. There is a gap in terms of facts, but in terms of how you take those facts, because the second part of the statement was, there is nothing I can do about that. We can do something about everything. So just because there is a gap objectively in society, unless you're an activist and you're actually out for the rights of all the women, if you're just talking about your own life and your own circumstances, then there is so much you can do about that. You can go and ask for the gap to disappear. You can come and say like, hey, my colleague who does the same work earns, let's say, 20% more than I, and I think it's unfair. And I believe that it is in our power to make this gap, at least for us, disappear. And again, if you're an activist, it's a completely different story, but we are not talking to activists, we are talking about individual women who feel that they're struggling in their work environment in the Western context.
Okay, so to re-summarize that is just, you don't just go from the position of saying that, there is a gender gap and there's nothing you can do about it. There's actually two routes you can take, or actually three. Number one is to keep that victimization statement, and then nothing will change. The second is, if you're just trying to empower your own situation, there are various tools that are going to be made available when we start discussing the systems for living on the second part of this interview, that will allow you to take action on that and narrow the gap. And then the third one is, if this is a topic that you're absolutely passionate about, there's a lot of groups that are actually activating or being activists to reduce that gender gap and to make sure that equality is promoted much more, and so that this is not a reality that needs to be faced. So out of those three options, it shows that you do have options. You can take an action that best serves you, and so you don't need to just stick to your victimization stage.
I think there is no circumstance in life where you have to ever be a victim, and actually we don't even have to talk about men and women. So many people in different circumstances choose to play the victim role because that gives you a permission to not do anything. And it's a choice. Maybe some people enjoy being a victim in certain circumstances. It's fine. But when it comes to an individual woman in a workplace in the West, I believe there is no earthly reason why you should not make yourself equal to the rest of the world.
So I'd like to add this question. Why would you think that women actually have that fear of speaking up with the topic for themselves?
I wonder if it's always fear, but sometimes when I was in Kazakhstan speaking at this female forum, it's actually interesting because the discourse there is different from the Western world. It's again, that might be the post-Soviet background, but a lot of the messages that were spoken from stage were that, it's us who put ourselves into that role. Like, I go to look for a job and I say, I'm in my mid-20s, or let's say late 20s, I've just married, I'm probably going to have a child, and you already feel inferior. You already feel a little bit unfair. I remember I got pregnant with my first child and actually went out looking for jobs. And it was completely counterintuitive. Like, isn't that your problem? You are supposed to, you are immediately at a disadvantage just because you're a woman and you will eventually have a child. But this is often a disadvantage which we women impose on ourselves, because it's our choice. If we really want to be mothers, then yes, but then let's not pretend that we are victims in the workplace, because that was our choice to be mothers. But if we choose to be active in business, then this is a different choice. And then women who have children and have business know that family is never a problem with business. It's never an excuse not to do business. So it's our choices, and when we take a choice or we make a choice, we have to stick to it, and we have to take a full responsibility for what we choose to do, and forget the victim, because that was the choice that we took. So I would say, first, never be a position of the victim. Second, have responsibility for what you choose.
Perfect. So, wow, that's an amazing start. And so that was just the first topic. So we talked about the gender gap, and so we've talked about this. Now, for the second one, we want to cover the brule, which is about being outspoken. So the way that I'd frame this is that I'm not heard within the workplace, and it doesn't seem like my opinions are being heard. What would be your opinion about that?
I would go back to what I said. We train people how they are going to treat us. It's true for everyone in every circumstances, and if women have a softer voice or a softer manner of speaking, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be heard, because if you look, can I bring a pop culture
Sure, absolutely.
example? Because I have a 10-year-old child, so we read Harry Potter and we watch Harry Potter. Dumbledore, he's the huge authority. He never spoke aggressively, assertively, or very loud, right? He's described as quite soft-spoken, yet he's heard. And I'm sure if you think about that, a lot of people that we massively admire have this very soft way of speaking, and they're heard, because what matters is not the outside appearance. And I know that for a fact, because I look like a girl. I've been so many times on stage, like in Russia, there was this massive event with huge entrepreneurs, and I went on stage, and the first thing I felt was that the people were looking at me thinking, what is this girl doing there? I get it, but the strength doesn't come from how you look. The strength comes from the core which is inside you, and if that core is there, then your appearances are just deceiving, and people will feel the core eventually, and maybe the first meeting might be the struggle, but you'll train the people. We've been to meetings a lot with you, and I don't normally shout or yell or scream or wave my hands to be heard, but it's taken me maybe a little time. But if you're assertive, if you know what you mean, if your opinion matters to you, and it matters to you that people hear your opinion, they will hear it. Unless you're surrounded by jerks, which, of course, in that case, you should make a choice to move out of this environment.
Exactly. They're going to lose a talent within the company, and then your force or your power is going to be used for a company that respects your voice a lot more. And so, digging deeper into that, one of the aspects, or one of the questions that came up was, when I'm doing work in the workplace, it seems like a lot of men take credit for the work that I do. How do you feel about that?
I think this might be to some degree the case sometimes. And again, it's how you train the people around you, right? Train. Sounds funny, but that's how it is. There have been cases where in a meeting I would say an opinion and it's not heard, and then a man repeats it, and then this opinion is credited to the man. Again, how important is that? Like, I think the problem here is a little bit deeper than just someone taking credit for your work, because people would really see your value for what you are. Are you contributing or not? Who takes the credit is irrelevant. Maybe because I'm a business owner, I don't care to be credited for whatever I contribute. It's not my problem. My problem is that my business has to be strong, full steam ahead, going towards the mission. Helping people, transforming people, that's what I care about. Who is credited, you, I, or somebody in this room? I don't care, because that's not my problem. We need, the problem is that it's the social network syndrome. We want the likes, we want the comments, we want to feel that we are loved, but if you truly know your value, do you really care? I don't care, because even if somebody else in the meeting is credited with the idea, the overall general perception of my presence in the meetings is that I contribute a lot, and I know that my contribution actually is going to change something about the business, and that's all what I care about. When it comes to salaries, if I believe that I'm not paid fairly and I just ask for a raise, I just go and I say so. So it's the core. If you have the core, nobody will walk over you, because the core is the thing that keeps you together. It's not how you look, how you speak, how loud your voice is. It's how strong you are. Are you capable of sticking to your decisions? Are you capable to valuing and honoring your values in life? You know, what's important to you. If you have the strong core, nobody will walk over you, right? And the same way about the opinions. I do not care if people credit things to me or to someone else. What I care about is that our business does its mission.
Now, I actually want to elaborate on something you mentioned a lot, which is the core. And then it seems to me like there's a lot of people that, and this is walking away from the core topic of women in the workplace, but it goes closer to what you speak a lot about. I mean, you talk about happiness, you talk about, you know, finding that core. So I'd love to open it up here and see what is something that not only women, but men as well can do to strengthen that core so that this doesn't hurt as much, or they don't feel this pain of having other people steal their ideas.
I haven't trained about that. I believe, though, that our unhappiness comes from our own disconnect with ourselves. So why do we feel hurt? Because we feel that if somebody looks through us or doesn't value us or is not nice to us, that there is truth in what they feel or how they treat us. So if somebody says something, criticizes you, we usually feel hurt if there is some resonance within what we believe truly about ourselves. If I said that, Jason, this green color really of hair doesn't work on you, you would never feel upset, because you know that your hair is not green.
I was wondering for a second, I was like, is the light making my hair green? This is weird.
Exactly. So that's the same thing with criticism, with not being noticed. It only hurts us if it finds resonance within ourselves. So to find this core is that we actually have to mend our relationships with ourselves. We have to be fine with our flaws, accept them, and see that this is just part of us, and that what makes what we are. We have to be clear on the things that we love and value about ourselves. Sometimes they are actually our flaws that we love about ourselves, but we have to be honest with ourselves. Who I am, what I love about myself, what is odd about myself, but I'm okay with that. And just loving yourself for what you are. Not being complacent, you know, I don't need to grow or change anything about myself. No, just accepting yourself for what you are. And complacency is never good. When we're talking about core, a lot of it is just working with yourself, is constantly growing. I love this quote by Harv Eker, there is no big problem, there's only little you. So whatever happens to you, if you look at it from this point of view, is that you have your relationship with you. It's never going anywhere. You love yourself for what you are. You can value yourself for what you are. Then nobody is going to get through to you. It doesn't really matter. And then if every problem in your life you see as an opportunity to become stronger, then you'll just become stronger and your core will become harder inside and hard, hopefully soft. And more.
Softly strong.
But we all need that backbone.
And, you know, we opened up a can of worms here just talking about this topic, because the fact is, this is a journey that everybody has to go through, and it's something that we could talk on and on about. And I think if you're...
That's what I'm saying. There is no women and men. There is humans. It's just that women sometimes have a good excuse. You don't hear me, you don't value me because I'm a woman. Is that true? If you think that's true, then say, did you just now not listen to me because you think I have nothing to say? That's all. And then you'll start the discussion and you'll find out.
Interesting. So when you feel those situations happen, do you suggest that you address it right away?
I address things right away, because not addressing things, holding up... First of all, when things happen to us, we give them meaning. How often is this meaning truly what happened to us? Sometimes somebody says something to us and we think, oh, it's because you think this way about me. But maybe that person had an experience during the day or whatever. The meaning could be something totally different. So if you don't address your issue, what happens is that, first of all, you accept the meaning that you gave to the circumstance. You take it for granted that that was the meaning, and then it gets frozen in time, and then you add more and more meanings. And if the same things happen to the same person, you might end up thinking about the person something so utterly different from what reality is. and not dealing with this problem. And in psychology, there's such thing as passive-aggressive behavior. It's the worst thing we can do to each other. So, of course, the moment the problems are, it's better not to get heated up. It's better to just clarify. And again, when you're in crisis, the best way is to ask questions. Don't assume. Don't take your meaning and start running with that. You know, like, you're not listening to me. You never listen to me. It's because I'm a woman and you're a man. No, ask. Ask questions. Don't assume. Ask, why didn't you listen to me? Was something more important? Don't you value my opinion? You know, don't go straight into, you know, whatever is easy escape.
Wow, so I love it because we actually just talk about one aspect of the problem, and I almost feel like every other question I'm about to ask and every other situation, we're going to come back to a very similar solution. Because the second statement that I want to bring up is the fact that there is a gap statistically between the salary of women and the salary of men.
Yes.
And, you know, if I ask your opinion about that, I almost feel like you're going to actually suggest something along the lines of you need to actually address it yourself. You need to have that conversation.
In the West, mostly yes. If you are in any other country where there are objective reasons why this is happening, where the whole sexism is much more ingrained in the society, then that might be a deeper problem. But again, I'm talking in the Western context because that's where I'm from, and I'm not female activist. I'm feminist, but I'm not actively taking part in this movement. So I would not be able to judge women's position, let's say, in India or somewhere in African countries. But in the West, yes, and we started from that. You know, of course, facts are there. There is a salary gap. There are less women in the boardrooms. There are less women in the power, you know, running the states. But often the question is it because men don't trust us, or is it because women feel that this is not my thing? I don't want to be a boardroom member. I don't want to run a business. I don't want to be in business at all. I want to be just an employee because I want my mental capacity free for my children when I get back home. A lot of the times, the facts are like that because we women tend to take this kind of choices as well and take to perceive ourselves in that light.
Well, let's open on that because you've already mentioned it with the fact of, you know, women have to give childbirth, and then you talk about maternity leave, and that's a big reality that is often addressed, or is often, you mentioned initially that it could be used as a crutch, but it is a reality that if you do decide to bear a child, it could have some limiting opportunities for you in the workplace, or the fact that you are a woman, is that something that plays against you, and how do you manage that?
Look, how many children do people have on average? 2.1.
2.3? Okay.
Oh, 2.3, right. Okay,
like
let's say 3,
okay.
Right? It's 3 times in your life you're going to be taken out of this environment. I've had 2 children, and granted I had easy pregnancies, easy deliveries. Some women do have to struggle with that. But this is just one aspect of that. There are disabled people who have difficulties, who tend to have more medical leaves. Men can get into trouble and have to take themselves out of the environment. You know, sometimes men burn out very early or have a heart attack at 35. There are so many circumstances how you can get out of this environment. The question is, if you are in the childbearing age and you feel that you want to have a child, what is your priority at that time? So my first child 10 years ago, I felt that I wanted to dedicate myself to my first child for a year because it was an interesting new experience for me. I grew as a human, and of course I was out of the work environment at that time. And I would say that maybe it was a disadvantage, but what do you do when you have a child at home? You take care of the child, but you have a lot of time to yourself. You can still keep on growing. You can still keep on taking part in some part of the life. And a lot of women in my team who have gotten children recently, and they're young women in their like late 20s, early 30s, with the first child, they chose to actually, at least to some degree, take part in the work, not because they were afraid for their job, they were afraid for their sanity. And I remember that with my first child, when I was, for 1 full year, I was hands-on mom, because that was my choice at that time. At some point, I was like, please, someone grown up, talk to me. Because you get tired. We are here for experiences. So when my second child was born, which was 6 years later, and by then my business was already much bigger, I remember she was born on Thursday, and I was already on Saturday, I was already waiting for Monday so that I can start taking part in business again. Because I love both of my children very much, and I spend a lot of time with them, really a lot of time with them. But it's a balance. It's a balance, everyday balance, which doesn't change just because you're off for a few days to a maternity ward. Of course, if you breastfeed your child and your child doesn't go to a daycare, then that is a logistical complication which sometimes can impact your work life. But I think even the employers change, and nowadays employers are much more comfortable adjusting to the working style of young mothers, and a lot of employers don't mind having these young mothers even half-time still plugged into the work, so that at least things don't get lost. At least I, as an employer, I'd rather have all my girls who are young right now, who are about to get married, to work a little bit on the business when they have their children, because then things don't get lost. It's a legacy in business. So I don't see any reason, if your choice is to be plugged into work, then I'm sure there are so many ways to keep this on. And with Eve, my second child, she was 4 months when I went for my speech at Underground. It was a huge stage, 500 people listening, and I took her along. I had to take a nanny, because when you're on stage, you can't come up with a baby, but you know, there are ways to solve the problems, and my choice with Eve was to get back into workforce, and I don't feel that my relationship with my child changed in any way.
And so what we're saying is that with the evolution of the workplace, like in general, workplaces are showing a lot more flexibility, and as you are an entrepreneur, you're actually demonstrating how that flexibility allows you to empower women, to give them that opportunity if they choose to do so. I wanted to touch more on that, because you say, like, for women that choose to have a child, do you think in the workplace, is it advisable, do you have an opinion whether women should be encouraged to have a child early, or should they be waiting to have a child? And is that something to consider?
I believe that we all have to make our choices completely independent of what society says. And that would go everywhere. And here we can go in other areas, because we make our choices when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to fitness, when it comes to even work. Nowadays, there are so many people who choose to be digital nomads, and they are essentially employees. They just have a few employers. A lot of them are like that. Yeah. But there is also a choice in how do you want to build your personal life. Do you want to get married or not? Do you want to have a partner or not? Do you want to have a child with your partner, or just have a child irrespective of whether you have a partner or not? I think these are all personal choices which women have to make based on their feelings and not based on what environment or society says. As an employer, I would say that what is important for me when it comes to my girls and boys who work for me is that my employees have to be happy. And that's the most important. If they're happy, they're productive. And if their happiness is tied to my company and they can continue contributing, I'll help them. I'll go all out to help them to accommodate to their personal needs. But what I care about is that they're happy, but they're also capable to contribute to the extent to which I want them to contribute. And let's say if one of the girls who was essentially almost running my business went on a maternity ward, she said, I can only work half-time. That was good enough for me. But we, of course, made the adjustments in the salary and everything, but that was her choice as well. So as an employer, I would say that if you're a smart employer, you'll accommodate to your employees' needs. And if your employees' need at 30 is to immediately deliver a child, then that's their choice. And if their choice is to disappear with that child for a year, then you've lost the employee. But you don't need an unhappy employee. That's not making any better.
True. And so that's a good notice for all the employers out there. And I'm glad you answered that way, because I don't think there's a prescription for what to do with your life. But I also feel like I should do a nice plug and say, if you're unsure of what you want in all the areas of your life, have a look at Lifebook, take the quest. Because honestly, that is a place where you actually get to have a lot of clarity on what you want in your life, because you divide those areas. But that's a topic for another time. I want to reel it back in, and I want to shift now to a new rule.
Yes.
Which is about leadership styles for women. And I'll state it this way. If I want to be a leader as a woman, I need to become like a man.
So objectively, women and men have, to some degree, differences. Well, not to some degree. We can deliver, you guys can't, obviously.
Sure.
But there are other differences which are not hard and fast rule, but women tend to be more intuitive. They tend to be more emotionally plugged in, because that's biologically necessary for us to raise children. So our intuition tends to be higher naturally, and we are more attuned to other people's emotions and feelings, right? So theoretically, women have advantage to be emotionally very mature. they have an advantage. Whether they do that or not, it's, again, personal choices. But if you're a conscious human being, especially if you have a child, a little human being at home, you will learn so many things. I've learned patience with my children to the degree I've never learned it anywhere outside family environment. So when it comes to leaderships, there are a lot of different styles. But one thing that really helps in leadership, because leadership is essentially about working with people. It's mostly people. If you can work with people, if you can nurture your people and get them to be the best versions of themselves and be committed to the goal that you all share, then logically your team should be succeeding, right? And in that aspect, we women have a natural advantage. We are attuned to other people's emotions, much more than men. Because, and I don't know how much it's true, but people who study men and women say that, historically men were the hunters, so they're very much like this. And they're very focused. And women, because they were nurturing the campsite, with the fire and the children and everything happening, so we're capable of covering a lot of areas. All these things are so good for leadership. Mm-hmm. You can always keep tabs on so many things. You're attuned to other people's feelings. I think we women could make much better leaders, honestly.
I would actually agree. I mean, I remember, I forget which one of them, but I was reading Conversations with God, and one of the volumes actually talks about in ancient time, women were actually the leaders. Mm-hmm. And then there was a struggle where men who didn't want to just do the menial tasks. And I mean, this goes on a tangent, but I agree. And I think there's a research that came out, and unfortunately I cannot quote it, but it said one of the highest correlators of success for a CEO was his intuition.
Yes. That's true.
Because when there's so many decisions to be made, there's so many data points, then intuition becomes one of the critical factors to be able to do it.
But men have advantage as well. So when it comes to leadership, and here I'm not talking so much about leadership, because leadership is about working in a team, making things happen, right? But when it comes to, let's say, business, running the business, getting business to succeed, then here decisiveness is important. And here men have a bit more of an advantage. Men tend to decide faster and be more, not stuck, but let's say if they decide, they go along with their decision. They don't doubt as much as we women tend to doubt. Men also have the more natural tendency to compete with each other, which also actually helps you, you strive. Women are more participatory. So of course we have, but I don't think you have to take on masculine or feminine sides to do one or the other thing. We should just accept that all these things are natural to everyone. There are men with really strong intuition. There are very decisive women who would never change their decision. It's not like purely man or woman, but you definitely do not need to become a man to become a leader. Definitely not.
And so there's a lot of statistics again that will speak about the top layer of management is often dominated by men. Is there anything that we can do either from an activist perspective or from an individual perspective to actually help equate that?
This is such a hard question because we have a big team, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes I'm also wondering where are the women leaders? But you see, we cannot be UN. I'm saying UN because the headquarters of UN in New York don't have windows on the side walls so that all the offices are equally with just one window and there are no corner offices.
Okay.
Yes, that's how weirdly balanced they're trying to be. As a business owner, I would like to see in the boardroom people who contribute to the decisions, to strategic decisions, to running the business, to succeeding with the business, rather than just a certain gender balance. And I'm sure that a lot of people take decisions the same way. And here, that's exactly the problem. Do you want to pull the women up and try to train them, or you're just objectively looking at your all employees and you're picking the people who you think will support you the best? I guess there has to be some kind of balance between the two, because on one side, of course, you want the strongest people, but you understand that maybe some women just need a chance. But if there are no women who can be given that chance, what do? Do you just go and, like UN, just hire a few women so that they sit there, but they will be quiet, silent? What's going to change? So, it's the thing where you have to just base your decision on what you have at hand, and we all have different circumstances. We've had times in Mindvalley where we had mostly women and all our guys were programmers and they just didn't make it to the boardroom. So, now it's a little bit the other way. We are trying hard, but you cannot put a woman on the board just because she's a woman. Just maybe in the government level, there is an efficiency at the point where you might do that. I do not know. The question is, the question is more like, if there are capable women, are you letting them rise up or not? And if your answer is yes, I'm allowing them to rise up, I'm allowing them to show their best, I'm helping them as much as I can, then that's as much as you can do. Or if you feel that there are not enough women, go out and look for women. And if you have two equal candidates, go for a woman because you feel that there is a gender disbalance. There are ways, of course, there are ways, but you also can't compromise the success of your business just for the gender equality. And that's, I'm saying, not as a woman, unfortunately, and I know that might anger a lot of people, but as a business owner who happens to be a woman, I still make choices based on what's good for the business. Mm-hmm. And if in a big picture I see that we are lacking women, then I'll be going out actively looking for those women. And maybe they won't be in the board, maybe they will be among our teachers, among our our authors. We can strike the balance there. There are ways to strike the balance. I believe that the energy has to be balanced. Mm-hmm. That's important.
And so we've talked from the business owner's perspective. I'd be curious to know if you'd have any advice for a woman who's at a manager or senior level that wants to make it to the boardroom. Are there any ways she should behave or any way she could let herself be known that she has an interest in that position? Is there any change that should be made at all? I'd be curious to know your opinion.
We have this question among the girls in Mindvalley. Mm-hmm. We've actually had meetings where we come together and women at management position want to understand how do they rise up. But my advice would go both to men and women. If you want to rise up to the board level, you have to take a very big interest in the overall success of your company. See the white spaces, see what needs to be improved. Have an opinion, pretend that it is your company. What would you do? And speak up about that. Have the courage to talk to the biggest boss and share your opinion. And if that's the case, you'll rise up no matter whether you're a man or a woman. There is no other way. With women, it's the same old advice. Just know what you want. Is it important to you? If it's important, stand up for it. If you stand up for it, you'll be heard. And if you're not heard eternally just because you're surrounded by people who are hopeless, then just change the environment. Because we women know very well, nobody can be changed. Men can't be changed, husbands can't be changed, people around us can't be changed. They can be trained how to treat you, but in the core, they will not change. In the core, you probably won't change unless you work on yourself. So the important thing is to know what you want, is it important to you, and stand up for that.
That is beautiful. And I love how you I love your perspective because you actually try to, every time I position things from a men and women perspective, you actually unite it as a species and you speak to both genders. And I think that's what I really appreciate from the perspective you come from when we talk about this topic. And to be honest, it's so interesting to speak of this topic as a man. Yeah. So I get to ask these questions. It's very curious for me. So if there's any of the men who are listening, I will go ahead and share my own advice and you can tell me if it's good or bad. But I think this training is probably one of the most important ones for you to listen to, because if you want to have the most amount of productivity within the workplace, seeking to understand these differences and embrace them are definitely going to add to the bottom line, because we both bring different things to the table. And not just from a gender perspective, but you have a lot of qualified people on the team, and if there's a way that they're not being expressed in the boards that are where the decisions are being made, you're probably missing out on a lot of important information. So one of the goals of this episode was to bring a lot of understanding, and so I hope there's a lot of men that are listening to this episode as well.
I think it's an important topic for men as well, especially in light of everything that has happened last year, and the fear that has happened among the men, and I can feel it, I can see that men are scared. They don't know how to treat women anymore because we have not had this discussion. And oftentimes this discussion sounds like a house fight, rather than actual discussion and conversation. So I'm not surprised if men are scared, if they don't know how to treat women. And that's actually another place where we can become victims, because if you do not know how to treat your colleague, you'd rather avoid communicating with that person. You avoid communicating, you do not know what you each have to contribute, and communication will not happen, and growth will not happen, and then we women say again, you guys don't appreciate us, but for us to appreciate each other, we have to be open and not afraid of each other.
And so what are some basic steps that people could take when it comes to interacting within the workplace if they find themselves not being able to be in a comfort position to speak with women in the workplace and really be open about these topics?
That's a slightly painful thing, because I wanted to joke and say, just enjoy yourself. That's honestly the most important thing in your life, right?
Yeah.
The moment you don't enjoy yourself, change the environment. Like, you're in the wrong place if you're not enjoying yourself. But when it comes to fear of communication with men and women, then maybe that means that you have to have a discussion with men and women. So last year, the girls actually in Mindvalley decided to make a calendar of the boys because we thought, that women are being objectified, and we have our stamps that you take care of your house and everything, and we wanted to change positions. So we started talking to the guys. We had our ideas as women, what would empower women to see men looking in the same situation as we women, looking all attractive and doing housework and all of that. That was our position. And we went to the guys and said, guys, are you going to play with us, because we want to empower women by turning it around a little bit. But the interesting thing was that when we started discussing how to make it work with the men, we found out so much about men which we did not understand. The vulnerabilities and weak spots that they have, the fears that they have that we were not aware of. So this conversation, while we thought we were going out to stand out for women, we found out that it's not about men versus women. It's about us understanding each other. And the way men don't understand us, we don't understand them oftentimes. Or we can understand everyone, but we sometimes refuse to. We sometimes prefer to be blindfolded because that's easier to be a victim. We're going back to the same thing. Some people just enjoy being victims.
This is true. Now, yes, there's a lot of work to be done on the understanding. And as we taper off this interview, we're going to have some systems for you guys to apply, and ladies. I shouldn't say you guys, I should say you ladies, or you people. We're going to have some systems for you to apply that's going to help you with eliminating the gap, especially when it comes to the salary gap. We have a very interesting exercise for you to do. And we have a few more systems that will be able to apply so you can get out of that victim state and really get back into a more empowered position so that you can be a part of the solution of what is this perceived problem as we're trying to move forward. And fact is, I've just finished reading Sapiens by Yuval Harari.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to look at what has happened throughout history of the thousands of years that we've been here as a species, and how much change has been happening in only the last, say, 50 years. And I think that there's an appreciation to have on how quickly we're supposed to be adapting and why this confusion is actually quite normal as things are changing so fast. I'd want to see how the conversation could continue, and so for people to interact in the tribe, would you have some interesting thoughts to leave the tribe with so that we can continue the conversation around this topic?
In this particular topic, I would do my regular thing and come back to us just being humans. And the most important thing is to actually know what you want. Really know, and stick to that. Because oftentimes we don't. We follow things which are not our goals, and that's what makes us unhappy, essentially. Once you know what you want and you have the motivation, you'll figure out the way to get there. And everything else is just circumstances. How do we take circumstances depends on our own ability to deal with life and all that garbage that happens sometimes, and the good things. So circumstances don't matter, really. What matters is you. You are the only thing you can never lose. You're the only thing you can rely on. You're the only person who can give you all the love, all the admiration, everything that you need. So work on yourself. Work on yourself, and all the other circumstances will become irrelevant.
Beautiful. And as a Mindvalley Tribe member, you have hundreds of trainings that talk about all the topics that you can work on yourselves. So you're in the right place. We're trying to give you the best trainings around that. And I'd love to have this continue as a thread on the Facebook group. Share your opinions about this training. I'd love to hear if it triggered anything for you, because we talked about a lot of sensitive topics. So we'd love to hear your opinion. So that's it for this month's episode. I hope you guys had a great time listening to this dialogue around men and women in the workplace. And the biggest thing I want is to continue the conversation. We saw that understanding is really what's going to help close this gap and make sure that we both understand which perspective we're coming from. Are there statements that you agreed with? Did anything trigger you in a not so positive way? Let's keep the conversation going into the tribe. And if you want to look at the systems that we've made available, including one that will help you instantly close the gap when it comes to the income difference between men and women, do look at the Systems for Living there. And so with that, thank you so much for joining. And Christina, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jason.